All right. Well, I didn't film back up at the farm, but I got a bit of graft done up there. I've got thousands upon thousands of flag iris, and I know I've got a client that's going to take some, but I had a heap of them. So what I've done is I've taken a load of the root systems out with a load of different flag iris, and I'm just replanting out all around the edge here to secure the silk trap edges. So I've got some more stuff that's down in my overflow that's started to grow out, some sort of reed type system, which I'm going to take out and replant around there as well. So eventually it'll spread, it'll hold all that bank together and consolidate everything there, and also look very pretty, obviously, when the flag iris comes out. I've also got a shed load more to put along my damn wall. Again, it's just going to look bloody marvellous when you've got the general at 82 pound in front of a load of blooming yellow flag iris and white flag iris. Look mint. Anyway, so that's what I'm up to now. And then I'll show you what I'm doing out in the lake. So I've bought conduit as well this morning, and I'm just marking out most of the particularly bad stumps that have been eroded behind, and basically the carp have been burrowing and getting stuck in behind them. So they're a little bit more of a snag again than I wanted them to be. Not a lot really I can do about it other than to mark them. And as I say, I've got this will be in this other video, which will look at how we overcome that, different rigs we can use to do it, some of the new rule changes, and I'll show you what we've got doing there as soon as I've got them all in, and you'll be able to see the line. All right, let's get on with it. Right, I thought I'd take, while I'm sitting here, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for another fish to come along. Thought I'd take this opportunity to start a video that I'm going to do for Fensmere, and for the anglers going to be coming to Fensmere. So this video is going to be specifically for you, but it may be of interest to other people as well, because over the course of the last year, of course, we opened last March with Kevin Ellis coming to Fensmere, and you can watch his two-part video on his session on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description for that if you haven't already seen it or seen them. Great videos with some amazing fish. I mean, Kev really did have an absolutely awesome session. First fish out was over 70. He had a 59, a 48 and a 72 as well. So he had two 70s, an upper 50 and an upper 40. So it wasn't a bad first session on the mighty Fensmere. Now, he did lose a fish, and he did get his hooks caught twice on what are the old stumps that run through the lake. Now, if you go back in videos, back into the history, you'll see, you know, as we were preparing the lake, we had to do a drain down, which was a tricky thing to do. We had to get permission from the DDT, and we couldn't drain it right the way down. We could only take out a metre of water, 1.5 meters. To give us access to the stumps, the tree stumps, which I knew there was some in there. I mean, I hadn't, you know, I'd fished it for a few years. I don't really fish my lake very much, but I always just wanted to check and see how the fish were doing. So I'd do a couple of sessions in the spring and a couple of sessions, you know, late autumn, early winter. And I never really had any issues with the stumps. So, you know, I'd prodded around there and felt a couple and thought, oh, they don't feel great. You know, I was thinking they were sort of stuck up about this sort of much off the bottom. Anyway, I'll put some photos in of what we found when we drained it down, because it was literally a forest ran through the middle of the lake. I think it was the top bank of what would have been the old stream bed that run through before they actually dammed the stream. And instead of cutting them down at the bottom, they just literally lopped the trees down and left what was there. Now, they were horrendous. Some of them were sort of 3 foot off the bottom. I'm talking massive tree trunks, huge oaks. And there was no way on earth you could get them out. They were, you know, you're talking a huge old oak tree. And if anyone's, I mean, I've had to dig the buggers out in another paddock. And the actual ball root, the actual roots of a big oak was as big as my 6-ton excavator was. So there was no chance we were going to get them out of the lake. So all we could do, with the help of my good mate Simon, bless him, it was a tough job. It was Baltic cold, and I was out there in the chainsaw and he was in the boat, and I was chainsawing sections of these trees off, these old oaks that have been underwater for 70 years and are sort of petrified to this rock hard oak. And he was chucking them in the boat and taking them up to shore where we got rid of them. But all I could do is take them down to, you know, an inch or two off of the lake bed. And there was also rocks that ran up along that line as well. Now, you know, my thought process is that you've basically got this line of old stumps, but they're flat on top. They're not really going to create major issues for anglers as long as you drop the lead and the line comes up in the water and the fish comes up in the water. Your line should lift off and above them. Now, obviously, you can't fish from the main swim, the main double social swim at Fensmere, and fish across these stumps with back leads or with fluorocarbon, because you're asking for trouble. You're asking for getting cut off on the rocks, etc. Now, and people have been really, really good about it, but we've still had some fish losses. And we've still had line parting on these rocks and still had some issues. And so over the course of the year, I've just been, you know, racking my brains as to the methods to make sure that you minimise fish loss. Obviously, minimise losing a fish and keeping it's a crush barb on Fensmere, so these fish should be able to get rid of that pretty quickly. But I don't want line out there, you don't want hooks around there, and you certainly don't want a fish potentially having a little trailer for a little while. So what have I come up with? There's a couple of things that we're going to allow and do now at Fensmere, which is going to hopefully alleviate these problems. One is I'm going to allow a heavy sinking braid if you want to use it. Now the reason for that, and I'm talking stuff 0.35 and above, so quite heavy duty braid. We're not talking the fine thin stuff, because that's about as much use as a chocolate fire guard. It just hasn't got the abrasion resistance, but the bigger, thicker stuff has, and it's actually more robust. And the fact that we have boats means that if you do have any issues or something doesn't feel right and there's a bit of grating, you can get straight out in the boat, get straight above whatever it is, and with gear like that, you're going to be able to get it out and get it round. Because I've been out now, and I'm going to talk about this, I've been out there in the boat with the camera, and I've looked at what there is down there and why it's starting to become more of a problem again. So anyway, we're going to allow 0.35 sinking braid, or you can use floating braid, and I'll talk about another rig that you can use if you want to use it, and I'll actually tie one up and show you how to use it effectively, because people are not often using this type of rig, and people don't know how to tie it up properly. So firstly, you can use the braid, and that for me will mean that you've got less chance of your line parting, especially with if there's a rock or something there. Now, the reason that these are becoming more of an issue than they used to be, or were at the beginning of last year, is that the fish, because I took all the marginal snags out to make it a lot safer for fishing, what the fish are doing is that old stump line is now the big snag feature all through the middle of the lake, and the fish they've been at it. There's obviously loads of natural there. It's obviously a load of crayfish get in there, snails, all sorts of crustacean and stuff living in and around those roots, and they've been excavating it. And we saw this with Dan. Dan put his bait boat out with the sounder on, and there was like a 3-foot drop off, and I went, well, what the, there isn't one there. You know, I know there's a couple of carp holes, but it doesn't drop 3 foot, and it was quite a sharp drop. So he put a bait quite close to it and lost one, snagged him. And so I've been out there now and started to have a look. I've had a good prod around and had a look around there. And basically the fish have been in there excavating the silt. So now, instead of having a couple of inches, you've now got a foot or more of tree root exposed with roots. So what I'm going to do out there is, as well as being able to use braid, I'm going to identify all of the major issues and problems, and I'm going to put a conduit pole right on the snag. Okay, I'm going to put conduit poles, and as the trees work in a line, it's on a specific line that runs down where the old stream bed was. I'm going to go along there and I'm going to mark out where the major snags are with conduits, and between those snags, I will tell you, but between those snags will generally be a clear area of silt. So if you want to run a bait boat or want to run a rig through them to fish the far side of the snags, you can do that then safely, because your line's going to be running across the full silt between the two conduits. And then obviously as soon as you hook a fish and the lead drops, the fish is going to come up in the water, and if it kites right or left, just the conduit's just going to go down and let your line come off over the top. Either way, you're safe. What it will do is identify where they are. Now, personally, I'd probably get out there, if it was my week, I would be out there that first day. Remember, I'm out there in the boat most of the time, so it's not like they're not used to a boat. I'd be out there in the boat, I'd identify where they are, and I would put them in. But I think sometimes if you come in and you want to be as stealthy as possible, you might not want to spend the whole day on the first day there and out in the boat messing around, and I can understand that. So if I find them, I'm going to find those areas, I'm going to identify them for you, and it's going to allow you to then you know, really specifically put your rigs in spaces and places that are going to be safe. You're not going to have issues, and in my mind it's safer for my fish, and in your mind it means that you've got a much better chance if you hook a fish to land in it. Nothing worse. Fensmere is not an easy lake, you know. If you get 5-6 takes in a week, you've done well. And then 5-6 fish could all be 60 plus or 50 plus, you know. And therefore you don't want to lose one when you get a take. You want it on the bank. All right, so I'm going to conjure it along the lines of the snags so that you understand where they are, and we're going to allow 0.35 and above braid, sinking braid if you want to, but you can also use a floating braid if you use another tactic, which I'm going to allow and recommend, especially if you're again fishing from the main double swim. If you're fishing from the main double swim and you're fishing right long down into the shallows, it's about 160 metres, 170 metres down there. It's a long, long way. Now, you know, again, these fish now are getting fished for. And if you've got 6 lines coming out from that one swim and they're fishing right the way across the lake, then you've got lines everywhere. And I'm totally convinced, as an angler, and as an angler, you will know, having all those lines across a lake is restricting the fish movement and putting them on edge. They're finding lines, they're coming across lines, and it isn't good for your angling, and it's I think inhibiting and stopping a better catch rate amongst anglers, and that was more prevalent as the season went on, obviously. Now, a rig that overcomes that is a rig that we use at Rainbow a lot, and you'll have seen it and heard about it, but not many people have used it and not many people have tied it. It's called the bottle rig. Now, by using a bottle rig, of course, you are taking all of your line out of the water, because you're effectively going to fish with generally with a neutral buoyancy or floating braid that will then go straight to that float out of the water. And this is where the things are different, and I'll show you how I tie this, and I'll show you, I think, the best method for tying this. You'll then have a float stop. Your float will hit that float stop, and for instance, if you're fishing in 2 meters of water, you might set that up at 2.2 meters, just over depth, so your line is then in the water like that up to your float. It then comes down to hit the first lead, and this is what other people do. Some people fish this with a single lead, but I don't think that's super effective personally. I did used to fish that over in Australia many years ago, because the fish were, you know, it wasn't a problem. But I don't like having a very tight line coming straight down from the float to a lead, and then a 6-8 inch trace, and then your hook bait. What we do is we come down from the float to what will be your first lead. Now, the first lead, and again, I've seen people talk about this and they do it differently to me. I think this is the best method, and I'll tell you why. I come down to the biggest lead then. So for Fensmere, you know, it's not like you're fishing 200, 250 metres in a 100-acre pit and you've got massive winds coming through, and what you don't want is your float bouncing. That's why the bought floats that you get from Avid have that little bit of elastic. I don't like them. I think it can tangle up and be a bit of a cock up, but you can use them, no problem. I make my own bottles, but then I come down to the heaviest lead, not the lighter lead, to the heaviest lead. So for instance, on Fensmere, you might use a 6 to 8 ounce lead on that first lead, because that float's not going to be taking a pounding, not going to be battered, and it's not going to potentially lift a lead off the bottom, because if you lift that second lead, then you've got a chance of dragging your first lead. So I would fish between a 6 to 8 ounce on that first lead across to whatever you're fishing as your main lead. Might be a 4 ounce, 3 or 4 ounce lead, then to your hook bait. That way, you know that once that's set, and that length there from the first lead to the second lead, we generally make around 6 foot, 7 foot long. Okay, that gives you just enough then when you're out in the boat to be able to lay the rod out. So what you do is you lay it out. So you're laying your rig down, and then you're coming back, and then, oh, hang on, I'm in. Oh, yeah. Just get them out, them snags. Right, I'll turn this off for now because this wasn't supposed to be fishing. This was supposed to be about Fensmere. All right, so I'm going to continue. Where were we? So with the double rig or double lead setup with a 6 foot, it's basically a leader, 6 foot leader between the two, between the two leads. You know, for someone like Fensmere, you'd probably you'd use like a fluorocarbon for that. And then obviously your trace. So as I was saying, you from the boat then you can lay that out. So you can lay your first rig down, you can lay it back then to your second lead, drop your second lead, then that comes up to your float. Float goes and hits the float stop, and then you go back to your bank. You can tighten up to that then, knowing that with that big lead that isn't going to bounce, isn't going to move that second lead, and it's then not going to drag or move your rig, which of course you don't want to happen. The advantage to that is not only do you then not have any line in the water going through the lake or going through multiple sections of the lake, it actually works out really well for playing fish because you're playing them underneath. The only issues you can sometimes have is if another person's using another bottle rig, and that float then goes and catches the line as it's going underneath. But again, you know, when we fish somewhere like Rainbow, you're fishing as a team. Okay, so as soon as one of you's in, then the other one's onto it. He's making sure that everything else is okay and everything else is on point. And another thing we use a lot there to make sure you can seal your lines is the line biters, the solar line biters, which if you haven't seen them, they're like a little floating, they're like the equivalent of a floating back lead, but with a little bit of lead at the bottom, but then a float, and they clip onto your line, and you slide them down your line, and they sit either up above, just on the water, or just above the water, but they got reflective tape on. Now at night then, if you're going to go out in a boat and play that fish, super easy. You got your light on, you can just see where all your lines are entering the water, and it saves a whole world of trouble wrapping line up in, or wrapping braid up in a prop, which is no fun at all, I can tell you. Got the t-shirt on that one. So they're the difference. They're the things that we're going to implement at Fensmere. I'm going to do another video. I'm going to take you out and show where all of the snags are, and I'm going to put a map of Fensmere on this particular. I'm going to inlay that on this particular video, so that anyone that's coming can have a look at this video. And I'll urge people to look at this video first, and I'll show exactly where the line of snags are, show exactly where the conduit is. And I'll also show the rig tied up, show you how it's all done, so it's all set. Might even try and take you out there and just lay a rig out and show you how that's done, because it's if you haven't done it, you know, the last thing you want to do is be practicing something you've never done on a trip where you're liable or could catch something which is going to be a PB. Anyway, I'm going to call this a day for now because my battery's running out. I'm catching too many fish, and I've got a sneaky suspicion there's going to be another one. All right, I'll catch you later. Bye-bye. Right then, what I'm going to show you is basically I've just spent an hour or so just going along what I know is the old stump line. Now I haven't identified every stump because there's more, but the marker poles that I've put in represent some of the worst. So I'm going to leave these in here. If you know, when you come to fish Fensmere, I would come out right when you get here. Remember that these fish get fed by me in the boat, so they don't necessarily associate a boat with danger and an angler. They actually associate it with getting some grub, because that's what they've got for the last few years. So this line pretty much represents the old stump line, and And I've put these, there's a couple of particularly savage ones that they've undermined now, and they've really taken a load of silt out from behind it, so it makes it particularly bad. But I'm going to turn the camera and let you see. All right, so I'm going to zoom in. There's your stump line. This particular one, where are we? That particular one there on that end, just in front of that, is it's been massively underdug and undercut, so it's a particularly bad one. So I've put 2 around that area, so I would not run a line anywhere near going between them 2, nowhere near. The others are not too bad in between, so you can run lines in between them. And again, I'll show you how I'd fish it, potentially with either bottle rigs or with a an old piece of like a foam bung up the line. So again, that basically comes up your line, just keeps it off the bottom. So then when you get to take and drop the line, your line's already off the bottom, and it comes up in the water. So anyway, so there's your lines. That's what you got to deal with. A bit of savagery at Fensmere. Okay guys, so as promised, I'm going to show you the double lead bottle rig setup as we use it at Rainbow. Rather than doing this with a single lead, this is definitely a more effective, more efficient way of fishing this rig. Means that your vertical line, or your line going up through the water, is around 6 foot away from your end rig, which is obviously better than having the float coming straight off of this lead, which most people do with a single lead setup. All right, so normal rig. It's just my normal rig setup. The key with the bottle rigs is to make sure that these leads can drop off really quickly and easily. Because you've got a bit of terminal tackle on this and a bit of a setup, these need to discharge real easy. So on this one, I've just put a normal lead clip on here, but this is cut right back. Literally, that will fall off super quickly, super easily once that fish is picked up and hit that lead. That then is going through, this is a 0.68, nearly 60 pound fluorocarbon, 6 foot of fluorocarbon to the second lead setup. Now again, this lead, if you can see, let me zoom in on that. This setup has just got the tiniest little bit of rubber holding that. Again, you could cut this back and make it really small. You've just got to make sure that that comes off super easy. Okay, I haven't tied specific knots here. I've just tried to just get this set up so I can show you what's going on. So anyone that's looking at my knots, don't think they're my normal knots, okay? Right, so that then goes to a bead, your bottle rig or your bottle. Now I cut off the elastic and just have it fixed straight into the bottom of that bottle. And then that is going to a top bead up to a power gum stop knot. So if we look at it in its entirety, that is going to be up there in the water. That goes down to your second lead and then along to your first lead. As you can see, I'm just moving it now. And that's it. The rest of your line here is going up to your rod and back to your rod, but all you have in the water then is that vertical line or semi-vertical line down to that second lead and then across to your actual fishing rig. And that's how we fish them. Super effective rig. And for fishing over the top at Fensmere, fishing over the top of the stumps or fishing long up into the shallows, that is definitely a great way to do it. So if you want to tie these sorts of rigs up and you're not sure about them and you want to ask me when you get here, it's not a problem. I can go through it with you just to make sure that it's safe, because obviously them leads need to discharge. That's the key factor there. All right, guys. Well, hopefully that'll help, and I'll speak to you later. Bye-bye.